The moment he told me what 4M was looking to do and what they had the ability to do, I recognized it was the bane of my existence when I was building projects into my previous roles, that this was something that we'd always looked for. I won't over dramatize it as the holy grail of what we've been looking for, but it's not too far from that. So that's why I immediately said yes. I think it's a game changer for the industry moving forward.
Welcome to Convos with Chris, inside the minds of infrastructure experts, where I dive deep with industry leaders redefining how we plan, design, build, and deliver future-proof infrastructure through AI and innovation. I'm your host, Chris Garafola, Head of Content at 4M. Hi everyone, Chris here, Head of Content at 4M, where your utility research and project planning begins. Joining me today is Michael Cobelli, founder of Cobelli Consulting. Michael just recently joined 4M as one of our new board of advisors, bringing over 35 years of industry experience and expertise in civil construction. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining me today for this conversation.
My pleasure, Chris. Glad to be here.
So to kick things off, Michael, why don't you tell us just a little bit more about yourself, your background, your current company, and what made you interested in getting into this industry in the first place?
Sure. Well, first, I live in the Northeast. I grew up and lived my entire adult life in Connecticut. I'm actually a mechanical engineer by education, but worked in the civil construction industry my entire career. I've actually only been on one interview in my entire life. I did one interview right out of school with a heavy civil company in New York. They were kind enough to offer me a job, and I didn't feel the need to go on any other interviews. So I've accepted that, and I've been at that company ever since. I did a lot of my early career was a lot of actual project experience, where I was out on a project building heavy infrastructure in New York City. And then I gradually grew up into the company and elevated in the company to be senior executive, and eventually became president and CEO of Skanska USA Civil for around 4, 5, 6 years at the end of my career there. I should probably say that a little bit differently, but so my career has been in heavy civil, and actually, of course, I'm going on almost 40 years now that I've been in the business, and I really got into the business, I think, for one reason. I didn't love mechanical engineering, and in all honesty, I haven't done a lot of mechanical engineering in my career, but I've always loved puzzles, and I've always been a problem solver. And that's what's kept me in the business and really drew me to trying to advance in the business, is that's how I equate heavy civil construction too. It's a puzzle, and how you solve it, how you put it together as efficiently and as safely as possible is what the business is about. So I've always been fascinated and drawn to problem solving and puzzle building, and to me, this is just an extension of that. It really is a wonderful industry.
That's great. I can resonate with that. Being at 4M Analytics, we're an early stage startup, so there's no such thing as monotony here, and so there's tons of puzzles to be solved here at 4M as well. So I can definitely resonate with that. Is there a specific milestone? I mean, like you said, you're about 40 years of experience. There's been a lot of projects that you've worked on. I'm sure major projects. Is there anything that you can kind of hang your hat on in terms of this is a milestone, or this is a milestone from your career?
Yeah, and I will say they're personal milestones. It's what I really look back on in my career and say, what had the most impact on me. And, Skanska USA Civil did some of the most world-renowned projects in the country. And, from the World Trade Center in New York to subway systems in New York to big bridges to subway systems out in California, all multi-billion-dollar projects. So it's been some of the most high-profile projects in the country that I've been involved in. But in actuality, the thing that's made the most personal impact on me in my career, where I'll give you two. The first one is in my earlier days when I was actually out project building. All you did every day was try to do something better, more efficient, make a little more money, do a little bit less on the schedule. And then I had a fatality one day on my project. And having to go talk to the family of my coworker who didn't go home that day put my business in a whole nother perspective. It was finally recognizing the most important thing that I had, my job was every day, was to get everyone home safe. A byproduct is making money and being efficient and doing it, having as much productivity as you could. But it was really my job was to get everyone home safe. And that really didn't resonate with me, unfortunately, until I was faced with the tragedy of somebody not going home that day. So that really put my outlook on my business in a whole different perspective for my career moving forward till today. It really, really has. My second personal experience that I think really was a milestone for me was I spent probably 2/3 of my career in a cocoon, New York. And I know people think this is weird, but New York is a comfortable place. It's, you know, the business, you know, the people, you know, the work. You have all very talented people around you. And then Skanska was expanding to the West Coast, and it wasn't going overly well. And I raised my hand and said, I'll get out of my comfort zone and I'll go out to California and I'll try to grow this neophyte business and learn all new things. And I even surprised myself that I was able to get out of my comfort zone to do that. But it was probably, again, one of the best things that ever happened to me in my career. I learned how to integrate different aspects of the company to bring everyone together, to grow this one business and meet new people and new industries and new everything. And that was actually a springboard for me to becoming president and CEO, is that I had such a grasp on the national ability of our company and national focus of our company that it actually helped my career immensely. So it's those two things. It's understanding how dangerous our business is and what's really important, and then getting out of your comfort zone and trying something different and doing something new so that you can expand your own experiences and progress with the company.
But yeah, thanks, Michael. Again, I can resonate with some of that too. I'm the rookie here. Like I was saying, I'm the green thumb. This is my first time in construction tech. And so, I love speaking with you, the expert with all the experience, because I'm going to be learning a lot. But like they say, you can't grow unless you get out of your comfort zone. So I'm growing a lot too in this position that I'm in. And, when you mentioned the, unfortunate incident with the fatality, I can't imagine what you went through. At the end of the day, we're all people, and it's something that I know we get so tunnel visioned on. Okay, this is a business. Every point of a business is to make a profit and to get more efficient. And that's something at 4M too that we've been using more in terms of like, from a marketing perspective. It's like, and I will dive into this more, 4M and our solution, but yeah, we can help you with efficiencies and accelerate project timelines, but we can also make the job safer. And
absolutely, I think 4M's there. This technology can absolutely make the industry safer, because there, if you go into history, there are a lot of fatalities and serious injuries that happen from unknown utilities. Mm-hmm. Somebody either grabs something with a machine, or drives a pile, or does something that they, through no fault of their own, just doing what they're supposed to be doing on that day, they end up hitting an unknown utility, and a disaster happens for themselves, for their colleagues around them. So I absolutely believe that 4M can make the industry safer by truly letting people know what is around them.
Right. And I know as an industry, we have a skilled labor shortage on top of it. I don't know how much that goes into, are people thinking about, well, this is a dangerous job. Like I could actually, it's not like, my job, I'm working remotely where I don't really have to worry about safety hazards that much, and if we were to make the job safer, could that help with, even if it's just 1% with recruitment of skilled labor, every little bit helps.
Yeah. And, one of the people ask me, what are the challenges in the industry, moving forward? And it's always been about, as you heard me say earlier, productivity. How do you make more money? It's a very, very high risk business, both on actual building and, you're trying to guess what it's going to take to build a $2 billion 7-year job, in a 6-week estimate. And, so there's always going to be that risk. But what I see moving forward is a big challenge for the industry is what you just touched on, is getting skilled people, and I mean, mainly managers and educated people, interested in this business. In this day of working remote, in this day of a reevaluation of work-life balance, it's hard to get talented people interested in this business when you have to tell them, by the way, you'll be the first one to leave your house in the morning in your neighborhood and the last one to get home, and you're going to be covered in mud, and you're going to be exhausted, and all you're going to want to do is eat your dinner and go to sleep and do it all over again the next day. So it's and I know I make it sound like it's going to a chain gang, but it's you have to be a special person to want to be in the heavy civil industry, because it's different than a lot of other industries, let alone the high pressure to be successful and make money. You have people's lives in your hands. And there's so many other, such a high stress business that when someone can say, you know what, I'd rather work from home on a computer and be able to, coach my son's football team at 4 o'clock, it's hard to get people interested in this business. So I think that's going to be a major challenge for this industry moving forward, just getting the right talented people interested in what we're doing.
And it just seems like there's just more options these days than there were 30 years ago, because you couldn't work remote 30 years ago. And so now our industry, we need to compete with all these other industries where you can work remote. So how can we make, the civil construction industry more attractive? And maybe it's leveraging technologies.
No, absolutely. And I think another important aspect is, and again, I don't want to be generalizing on generations, but the newer generations going up, they hate chaos. They want things planned out ahead, and things go from A to B to C to D to E, and things, they're much more comfortable and much happier with that. Well, our industry is organized chaos, so if the 4M AI type of assistance for this business can make it less chaotic, meaning what you have involved and you can pre-plan it and you can get it done in a fashion that you can actually plan, being proactive instead of reactive, I think it'll make it a lot better for a lot more attractive for the younger, more skilled, intelligent people that we need to bring in this industry.
Michael, talking about attracting, what initially attracted you to become one of our new board of advisors here at 4M Analytics? I mean, I know somebody with your expertise and experience, you could have been on the board of advisors for, I'm guessing, many different construction tech companies. You chose 4M Analytics. What is it that drew you to wanting to be a part of our mission?
Sure. I retired from my president and CEO role at Skanska USA Civil around 7 years ago. And I did just to be able to have, and I know I just made fun of the prior generation or the future generation, but I wanted to have a little better work-life balance. And I'd accomplished about everything I felt I wanted to, and more than I ever thought I would do when I was a younger person. But then after a little bit of time, I realized I loved the industry, I missed the industry, and I still wanted to keep my brain active. So I started Cobelli Consulting, and I have a single client. I'm on retainer for the largest construction company in the country, 𝘁𝑯𝘓 Corporation. And it's awesome. I get to help problem solve. I get to do all the fun parts of our business. People building projects have a problem. They ask me to come in. I help them try to solve the problem. So that's been awesome. But before I started my own company, and even afterwards, I did get a lot of calls. I had a lot of very good relationships in the industry across the country, and I got offers to go back in that senior kind of executive role. I declined. I felt that was, if I was going to do that, I would have stayed at Skanska. But I also got many, many calls about joining boards and doing this, and I actually declined every single one of them. Mainly because it didn't interest me. I wasn't, it was a lot of the same stuff that I had been doing. But then I got a call from an ex-Skanska colleague, a person I respect, who said, hey, would you take this phone call? And the only reason I took the phone call is because I knew this person and I knew he was serious and I respected him. So I took the phone call, and it took around 5 minutes for me to be ecstatic about the opportunity. And that was, I even told the gentleman on the phone from 4M that, I surprised myself. The moment he told me what 4M was looking to do and what they had the ability to do, I recognized it was the bane of my existence when I was building projects into my previous roles, that this was something that we'd always looked for. It was, I won't over dramatize it as the holy grail of what we've been looking for, but it's not too far from that. So that's why I immediately said yes. I think it's a game changer for the industry moving forward, and I really wanted to be a part.
Yeah, that's great. I wish I was a fly on the wall during that conversation. It's always interesting when we tell somebody who hasn't heard about 4M analytics what their expression looks like, what their words they say in terms of what they think about it. I always love that raw, like that first time you hear about something that kind of just blows your mind.
But it's different with somebody who's lived it, who knows that this is a problem that's needed to be solved for so long and no one's been able to solve it. And then to have somebody call you and say they have a solution. I mean, that's what it's, why your eyes open up and you begin, how do I be involved in this? Because it's been a problem for the entire industry for as long as I've been involved in it.
Because a lot of construction tech, or just a lot of marketing in general, a lot of products, we were talking about it offline earlier, I feel like a lot of companies will create a problem and then they create the solution. Like, this was a problem before Absolutely. 4M came into play. This is something that we're not trying to, it's not a nice to have. It seems like it's a need to have from what we're hearing from the industry.
And it's a different kind of problem than most of our heavy civil problems. Most of our heavy civil problems are you trying to figure out building the better mousetrap. How do I do things a little differently? How do I pour concrete? How do I dig dirt? Things like that. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, this issue is out of your hands, and you are relying on third parties to solve your problem, or your fate of your project is in a third-party utility company's hands because you came across something that you didn't expect, and they don't have the same goals you do. Your goal is to build this project as efficiently and quickly as possible. Their goal is we'll get around to it when we can. And it creates such a different kind of dynamic on the job when your success can be based on people that don't have the same goals as you. So it's being able to be proactive instead of reactive, and get this all organized prior to putting a shovel in the ground is where it really becomes a game changer.
So you've kind of touched on some of them, but what have been, if you could name the 2 or 3 biggest challenges in the civil construction industry, what would you say that is?
Well, in general, it's always about funding. It's always about getting enough work to be able to, there's more need for work than there is funding for work. So the industry is very cyclical. It's when there's funding, things are great. When there's not funding, everybody's scrounging around for work. And then that's when margins start dropping down and people start getting a little more aggressive than they should, and not treating the jobs with the risk profiles that they demand. But it's really the biggest driver right now in all the industry is schedules. It used to be, how do I get an extra half an hour work out of a carpenter or a laborer or an electrician or something like that. Now it's how do I stop my job from being 2 years late? That is the biggest risk in the industry. And if you really go back in history, there's not a lot of big projects, especially in the last decade or two, that have come in on schedule. And if, again, do the research, a lot of the drivers was driven by utilities, problems, unknown, even known, but requiring a third party to support a project. So really, that's what I think is where A, 4M can help, but B, where the industry can do the greatest improvement is getting realistic schedules, and schedules that you can actually attain through proper pre-planning. And that's what it's all about, is being able to pre-plan. And if you don't know what's on the ground, it's hard to pre-plan for everything. So that's what I think is besides the people aspect I talked about earlier, is getting these projects done when they're supposed to be done.
That's interesting. Somebody that's not even, again, being new to the industry, being on the outside, whenever I saw a big project, it was almost like, oh, this project's supposed to be done on this date. It seemed like a formality. I'm like, it's not going to be done on that date. Like, no big project. Like, I'm originally from Vermont, but I lived in Boston for over a decade. The Big Dig was obviously the huge project there. That was way over budget, way delayed past when it was supposed to be done. I think there's a light rail or something going on in California right now that's been high-speed rail that's delayed. I just feel like consumers of said infrastructure, which is honestly all of us, right? Even though you might be planning, designing, building the infrastructure, we're all consumers of the infrastructure. It just seems like it's never on time.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that is a perspective of the industry that a lot of people have, and I'd like to say it's untrue, but it's not. It is, and I think that's the biggest challenge for the industry moving forward. Again, there's a lot of things that are tried and true and known, pouring concrete, erecting steel, things like that. Things may go wrong, but not to the extent as well, where you can't put in a key foundation because there's an unknown utility in the ground that now might take 2 years to get out of the way. And you can't move forward with it. And then you have an enormous amount of people on this big project who are, they're still busy, but they're going to be there for 2 years longer than you're there. The cost is enormous. And what that happens is that if that's attributable to the owner, it takes away the funding for the next project. So the next project gets delayed. So it's kind of a catch-22, is that if the industry can figure out how to pre-plan and identify the risk issues, get them resolved, and then build the project, they'll be shorter, they'll cost less, and there'll be more money for another project.
That's interesting. There's compounding negative effects to it by having, there was a webinar I was on earlier with Andy 𝘊𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝘂𝑀 saying it correctly, from WSB. He said something very insightful where every decision you make is based on the prior decision. So if your first decision is not based on truth, then the decision you base after that decision is not based on truth either. And then you get 10 decisions down the line and none of it's based on truth. And obviously there's a problem there. It's a compounding negative effect. Whereas if you start with reliable data, you start with higher confidence, it's going to be a better project outcome. So having that as early as possible, given that example, obviously makes the most sense. And it's I get it. It's hard to do sometimes when projects are trying to move fast. You don't have access to this data. But hopefully with 4M, this is what we're trying to change here.
And absolutely. And it's also about getting the right players in the room pre-planning. So if you have information that tells you there's something in the ground that somebody owns nobody knew it was there, they don't even know about your project. They don't, and it's, if you find it the hard way while you're executing your project, then getting them up to speed, getting them on board, getting them to plan and design what they have to do around it, as opposed to, pre-planning it needs to be done. You get them involved in the early stages, and it happens concurrently with all the other work that's going on. So it's let alone knowing what to do, it's getting the right players in the room at the right time to be able to successfully execute a project. Based
on your experience, can you give me an example of a certain project where having access to reliable utility data earlier in the project would have made a critical difference in the project outcome, where if you had a solution like 4M, where you could get instant access to reliable utility data, it would have really changed the outcome of a certain project you worked on?
No, absolutely. And it took me around 3 seconds to come up with this project because I lived it. Back in the late 90s, the first really large design build project in New York was the JFK light rail. So it was over, the first project being let for over $1 billion. It was design build, which meant that we were responsible for the design. So we were negotiating with the owner, the Port Authority of New York, for months and months and months. And the deal almost blew up, and all about utilities, because the owner wanted us to take responsibility for the utilities. Whatever you hit, whatever happens. And we're like, it's impossible. You've given us cartoons. We have no idea of what's in the ground. It's impossible for us to make an estimate or a guesstimate on both cost and schedule for that. So the only way we resolved it at the end of the day was to make it an allowance. They put a very high value as an allowance, and then as we hit something, we addressed it, and it came out of that allowance. It got the contract over the line, and we started the project, but it created havoc on the project. We were constantly finding stuff we didn't know about. We have a full design. We'd have to redesign. They would have to move things. There were weather restrictions on thermal distribution systems that if you didn't get it done by a certain date, you had to wait 6 months to get it done again. It created havoc on the job, and it was a accounting nightmare that took a lot of people's attention away from building the project and solving problems to keeping track of how many millions and millions and millions of dollars we were spending on revisions to the design because of a utility. So if we had had accurate information prior to bidding that job would have easily come in 18 months earlier, and millions and millions and millions of dollars cheaper that we wouldn't have been. Again, I keep going back to it. Being able to be proactive and pre-plan versus reactive. When you're reactive, you're not always able to come up with the most cost-effective solution. You normally come up with the most time-efficient solution because schedule is so paramount. But if that job had accurate information, it would have been a totally different job.
And that's not even taking in the opportunity cost of if the project was done earlier, you could have been doing other projects, other things. Like, how do you even quantify that opportunity cost of that foregone?
Yeah, it's very difficult. And the opportunity cost for the writer. There was 18 more months that the writer had to deal with the disruption of the construction, but 18 months of not being able to get on the train. Now you go to JFK and you take it for granted that this is such a wonderful system. You park miles away and you're at the terminal in 1 minute. Well, it didn't. Before that, it wasn't like that. It was a much different experience. And again, because of the lack of knowledge on what the utilities, riders had to deal with that inconvenience for another 18 months, which to me is the bigger hit. That it's such a world-renowned airport, and to not have that system available earlier was not good for the traveling public.
Yeah, I can imagine. I wasn't in Boston when the Big Dig was happening, but I can imagine that traffic was horrible before that happened. Like, even with the Big Dig now and being able to go underneath Boston to drive through it underground, there's still traffic underground. Like, there's always traffic in Boston, but I can't even fathom what it was like before that. And the fact that that project was delayed, I don't know how long. It was years. It might have been. It was a long time it was delayed.
And a lot of those issues on the Big Dig were design revisions due to unknowns. Now, it wasn't just utility unknowns. It was unknowns where the subway system, not being exactly right where the subway system, unknowns where existing wharfs used to be, that things like that. But a lot of it was also utilities, having to deal with, utilities that they thought were in area X and we're in area Y instead, and stop and react to it.
So I'd like to shift a little bit and focus a little bit on field team challenges during pre-construction. So when starting a project, you're trying to gather utility records, utility data from the office. Then you get the data, and then you're trying to equip the field teams to then go verify, validate these utilities in the field. From your experience, what have been the main challenges ensuring that field teams have the right information and tools for success?
Yeah, it was always a challenge because, and especially, most of my experience, or a lot of my experience in New York, where there's so many different utility companies, it's understanding the cast of characters. Who do you have to deal with? There could be 40 different utility companies on one project that you had to deal with. Some major, some minor. Even people's home services you had to deal with. So it was always a major challenge. And it was always a major challenge, believe it or not, to get the team to give it the sense of urgency it deserves. It's not sexy, for lack of a better way to put it. Where's the utilities and how are we moving them around? It's how do I erect this bridge? How do I do that? That's the sexy stuff that everybody wants to focus on. Well, you finally get it through people's heads. That's great, except you can't erect that bridge unless you do this first. So it's the driving factor of it. So it's always been a challenge. There was no one-stop shopping. It was always giving people a list of names and a list of utilities and say, go figure it out. Go get them. Go get the drawings. Go get the right people. Go get the right people involved in the project. And like I said, it could be 10, 20, 30 different utilities. There was no one-stop shopping. So if 4M can at least give that list definition and give that scope of where the issues are, the most important, so you can concentrate on them first, it would give the team a much better head start. But it was always, they were to their own devices to figure out, something could be small and, it doesn't look daunting. But then when you actually go talk to the people, it could take 2 years to move for various reasons that we don't know about. So it was always trying to figure out priorities, what's there first, and then priorities, and then helping, understanding if it's a problem or not.
You mentioned that part maybe isn't as sexy. People would rather get to doing the strategic work, doing the work that they actually enjoy and that's fun. And I know you mentioned it earlier too about how you're still working because there's parts of the job that you really enjoy, but then there's parts of the job that maybe you don't enjoy as much. And that's something that we're trying to communicate at 4M too, because I think a lot of people are afraid of advancements in technology, AI, taking your job. It's not taking the job, it's augmenting the job and allowing you and enabling you and empowering you to do the things that you actually probably want to do at your job. Absolutely. The things that take the strategic thinking and not so much of that mundane tasks. So I think that's a perception that some people may have in the industry. And that actually goes into the next question that I want to ask you is this innovation versus tradition conversation. I mean, it's no surprise, and I don't think it's news to any of us that this industry is a little slower to adapt than other industries in terms of technology. And you've seen the productivity curve. Other industries are much higher, and it seems like construction has been the laggard there. Why do you think the industry has been slower to evolve versus some other industries?
Yeah, and for a few reasons, I would say. The number one is just the risk-reward ratio. Our industry, if you're an accountant and you put a figure in a wrong box, it's wrong, and somebody may pay more or less taxes than they're supposed to, or whatever. But in our industry, you do something wrong, someone could get killed. So it's the risk-reward ratio. And what our industry is slow to adapt because the tried and true methodologies that have been used for decades, that people know, that they know when they put someone in a hole or they put somebody up on a bridge, that this is going to keep them safe. And it's hard to convince somebody that something else that they haven't physically laid hands on. Ours is a 100% experience-based business. When you get out of school as an accountant, there's not a lot of changes from the day you started work to the day you ended work. When you get out of school and you come to be a heavy constructor, you know nothing because you haven't experienced anything. And it's all about what you experience. So it's a slow business to adapt because the experience is what they've learned and what they trust. So the way to get around that, and I think especially with the 4M, is the tried and true experience of making sure you know what's in the ground is to go out and dig a bunch of holes and, find it physically. And sometimes that in itself is dangerous because, you think you're digging next to a utility and you might be actually digging on the utility. So it's become a time-consuming thing that if technology now can make that better, people will actually see it as making it safer and making it easier to plan their work. So I think they would embrace this with open arms. and be much quicker to adapt to it than they would, a different way to put up steel or a different way to pour concrete or a different way to form something.
It's a great point. The stakes are definitely higher in this industry. It's not like crunching numbers and you're not putting, digits in an Excel spreadsheet. You're dealing with the traveling public. People can die. So I understand that resistance, and especially I'm assuming there's other construction tech companies that have been here before us, and I'm sure there's been people that have gotten burned or that the solutions didn't really work out, so they're hesitant. So the trust seems like a big component of that, earning that trust. And I was on a call the other week with a gentleman from 𝘊𝘪𝘳 who's also using us 𝘊𝘪𝘳 engineers. And to build that trust, they would use our data and then look at prints of what they already knew was out there. And so they compared them to see, okay, like how much can we trust 4M? And they compared the data, and it was just as reliable as what they had. And our data, we were able to get it, in seconds versus the data that they had. It could have, taken months. Or weeks. So that's definitely something that I know we have to continue to build is trust. And at the end of the day, we can only do so much from a marketing perspective, or say, even if we feel like our product is the holy grail or the solution to solve a lot of these problems, it's really going to have to come from the people that are boots on the ground that are using these tools, using this technology to vouch for us, because and that's what we want to, because we need to be able to build that trust, and slowly but surely we're starting to do that.
Yeah, and you talk about previous technologies. I mean, when I was younger, the original solution to this problem, rather than just digging holes all over the place, was ground penetrating radar. And when I was that one job I just talked about with JFK Light Rail, I thought that was going to be the panacea, that I'd be able to go out there with ground penetrating radar and be able to map out all of my utilities and be done, and then be able to plan my job. Well, we found out it was extremely unreliable. There's so many different factors that go into what it's picking up and where it's picking it up and how deep it's picking it up and all of that we did it for a while, and then we ended up, it's so unreliable, we'll go back to the old-fashioned, let's dig a bunch of holes and find stuff.
Mm-hmm. Michael, another question here, branching off of the innovation and tradition question. In terms of the construction life cycle, where do you see the greatest potential for AI to make the biggest impact? And more specifically, which stage do you feel is the most ripe for disruption and change in the construction life cycle?
Yeah, and kind of building on what I've already said. Number one, the biggest impact can have, I think, is on scheduling. Is making sure that if we can, and then the answer to your other question is pre-planning, to make sure that we could pre-plan enough and understand what the job entails and be proactive, and then schedule it and then actually execute it. At the end of the day, the execution could even be the easiest part of everything. It's the actual making sure you understand the problem, you pre-plan it, you design everything the way you need to know what the problems are, and then executing it. It's rare that it's the execution that's driving the schedule of a job. It's all the other stuff that you don't know about that's driving the schedule of a job. So I think that's where it can have the most impact is making a 4-year job be 4 years as opposed to being 6 years. And it's all about understanding what the problem is in the pre-planning stage and solving the problems on paper and then going out and executing.
Looking ahead, Michael, how do you see utility data and AI changing civil construction projects over the next decade? If you had a magic wand and you could see how this AI technology, or we'll just say 4M's, utility AI mapping and analytics solution, how do you see that changing civil construction projects over the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Yeah, I mean, in two manners. Obviously, everything I just said about making them more schedule certainty and everything else. But what we've told a lot of owners in my previous experience is that, you have these monster jobs that are 5 and 7 years long, and you have a big company come in with an enormous amount of quality people to start building the job. And then the initial problems with utilities start to impact everything. So what we've been suggesting to them many, many times is, separate the two. Take care of the utilities first under separate contract, where you don't have this enormous overhead of a big company sitting around waiting for something to be resolved. Get that done, and then put out the project and the rest of the project, and let somebody build it in an efficient manner. And a lot of times, some of the owners have done that, but a lot of times they say, well, you know what, they're just going to have to do the same thing you do, which is go out and just find things the best they can, and then they got to go to the design. And then, well, if they have the information first, and these early works contractors have relationships with all the utility companies, they know how to do it. As opposed to these big general contractors who do it as a sideline. They can be much more efficient. Jobs, the utilities can get addressed in a much earlier stage in a more efficient manner. That goes cheaper, and then the general contractor can do his business and execute it without having this initial startup issue. So that's where I think it can help. It can give the owners the tool to be able to engage the right kind of people, the utility contractors, to do their work in an organized manner, pre-planned manner, and get it out of the way so that the big projects can then occur in a timely manner.
Makes sense. And the good news is the technology exists. So that's half the battle, right?
Until I had that phone call, I didn't know it existed.
Right.
And understanding how 4M does this, it seems intuitive, it seems simple, but no one's ever done it. And no one's ever been able to garner the power of the AI to be able to, if I had the ability to go back 50 years and see what the road looked like and where the utility was installed 50 years ago from photographs and things like that, and then put that into a convergence of all the information and come out with a result. I mean, yeah, we all love, it's intuitive, but no one's been able to do it before. And now that they can do it, like I said, it should really benefit the industry.
And now you mentioned you hadn't heard about 4M until you got that call. Me as a marketer, I'm going to take that as I got a lot of work to do. And so hopefully we get more people learning about 4M and talking about that. How would you champion 4M, or how would you describe or introduce 4M to your network and industry partners? What would be the core message you would tell them that you think would really resonate with them, and more specifically resonate with the key decision makers who would implement a solution like 4M?
I don't think it'll be very hard at all, because my easy discussion would be, this is what we've been looking for. We all know the problem. We've all experienced the problem. We've all lamented the problem. But to be able to come up to one of my ex-colleagues or an industry colleague and say, this is what we've been looking for. How many discussions have we had about, if we only be able to deal with this in a different manner, a more organized manner, life would be so much easier for us. So I think it's a very easy discussion. I'm not going to have to convince anyone that, they have the problem. To me, the convincing part is going to be understanding how you're solving the problem, how 4M is solving the problem, and convincing them of the reliability of it versus all of our old past methodologies, that this has the potential to be much higher reliability factor than what all the methods we've used in the past. So I don't think it's going to be hard discussions at all. I can't think of one of my industry colleagues who would look at me and say, "Nah, I don't need that." And everyone, I think, is going to be interested. They're going to want to understand it, and so they can make a decision for themselves on the reliability factor. But I don't think it's going to be a hard discussion at all.
This is what we've been looking for. That could be an ad. You have a new job as a marketer, Michael. That was great. To wrap up here, if you had to describe 4M's utility AI in one word, what would it be and why?
I've used the word already, but to me it would be game changer. And it's for all the reasons I've discussed about, having a solution to a problem that has been the bane of an existence of an industry is a game changer. It really, really is. And I know I'm overstating. You know, you might think I'm overstating it because of how complex our industry is, and you see all these unbelievable projects with cable stay bridges, and how do they do that, and what do they do? Yeah, but that's something that they've been solving. You know, that technology has been going along, and we've been able to solve those problems incrementally better and better and better. No one's been able to solve this problem for decades. And so I truly believe it is a game changer for the industry, to be able to get them to be able to pre-plan and understand the problems of their project. And that's where I think projects get in trouble. They don't know the problems of the project until they get to it, and then they have to react. To be proactive and pre-plan, total game changer.
Thank you, Michael. Well, this has been an amazing discussion. I've learned so much. We're going to have another discussion. We're going to have to do a part 2, part 3. I really, really enjoyed this. And so I just want to thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with everybody who's going to be tuning into this.
Appreciate it. It's always easy to talk about an industry you love when you have the passion for it. And, you never get too old to have the passion for this industry.